So on the 25th of this month, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, is set to hold a special summit on Somalia, and this is to find durable solution for the Somalia refugees. And with us in studio is the special UNHCR envoy on Somalia, that's Mohamed Afe. Also with us is the migration coordinator, IGAD, Caroline Njuki. Caroline, let me pick up with you as we were having a discussion before we went on break. Is this summit largely geared towards finding solutions to make the host countries more hospitable to the refugees, as opposed to finding solutions that will see these refugees go back home?
It's many things. That's part of it. But this summit is also happening in a broader, I would say, international context. In September last year, during the General Assembly, member states of the United Nations, for the first time in a very long time, I think, probably the first time in history, discussed, there was a summit on refugees and migrants. And preceded by that was earlier on in May, the World Humanitarian Summit that was really focused on, humanitarian issues in general, but discussions almost came down to what do we do with the increasing number of refugees. Of course, Syria plays a lot into the discussions that are going on now on refugees. But we also have the recently adopted Sustainable Development Goals that aim at leaving no one behind. So we cannot talk about global development if there is this huge population of people that in most cases are left out of core development planning. But coming back to a sub-region, as Ambassador Afi mentioned, the Somali displacement situation has been protracted over 25 years. And the approach of dealing with that displacement has for a very long time been strictly humanitarian, where refugees are in camps, and camps are good for certain reasons, but also not so good for reasons that I could get to later. And that has meant that people are born in camps, in Dadaab, in Jijiga, in Aliade, in Djibouti, mature, marry, while in camps. And it's protracted. They do not get schooling most of the times. That is the same as the host population. But that also has had an impact on hosting communities. If you look at most of, within the region, most of the refugee camps are in already very fragile environments. And so when you have an extra 100,000 people settle in an environment that cannot handle 50,000, then there will be pressure on social services, there will be pressure on the environment, there will be pressure on economic opportunities. Right. And that's a big impact on host communities. So this summit is looking at a broader approach to refugees. Okay. It is, yes, looking at conditions of return in countries where they came from, in this case Somalia. It is looking at how we can protect and assist them better in countries of asylum like Kenya and the rest of the countries in the IGAD region. But it's also having a conversation about how we expand opportunities for resettlement for those, resettlement in third countries, for those that cannot go back to Somalia and don't also have opportunities to really integrate in the countries hosting them.
I will add to what Caroline has spoken. This summit is also an opportunity to focus on stabilization in Somalia. I have, as a special envoy of the High Commissioner, visited all the camps in the sub-region, including Yemen. And I can tell you that no Somali refugee wants to remain a refugee forever. At some stage in their life, they would like to go back home and participate in the reconstruction of the country. And the opportunities in Somalia today provide hope for a great majority of the refugees to return home at some stage. But we know that Somalia requires collective international effort. It requires more so collective regional effort under the framework of IGAD. And that is why this summit will focus on creating sufficient conditions inside Somalia. Because as we speak now, there is huge potential to build infrastructure. There is need to build shelter. There is need to build schools and hospitals. There is need to build every basic facility that a human being will require, absolute reconstruction of the country. And the international community, through the efforts of the member states of IGAD, are being requested to channel more resources so that eventually Somalis, 900,000 of them, will get an opportunity to say we go back home. As we speak now, there is no possibility of massive return at a go of 900,000 Somalis back into Somalia because of the conditions inside. Therefore, the summit will focus on not only humanitarian, but much more the development of Somalia, the stabilization of Somalia. And you know that all the leaders who are here have sent their boys and girls in Somalia to make that country a better country, not only for the Somalis, but for the sub-region and the international community.
Right.
Therefore, this is an opportunity to take stock of what needs to be done now to make Somalia more stable, particularly under the leadership of the new president, His Excellency President Farmajo, and the team that is now in place in Mogadishu.
But when you say take stock, that is worrying because, as you have said, 25 years on, you have some of these refugees that have been in various countries. Some, all they have known is the host countries. They've never known Somalia. So at this particular point, if IGAD is meeting to take stock, one wonders, with all the situations that have been going on, and you have eloquently described some of the issues, infrastructure, social amenities. You're talking about the rule of law. Al-Shabaab still has a stronghold there, hence Amisom, as you have talked about. We also now have a famine that's, gripping some parts of Somalia. So taking stock sounds like, okay, let's now agree that these are the problems before we act on it. And yet, this is a situation that keeps getting worse.
Yes, but precisely that is why, for the first time, and I want to congratulate them, because the situation is getting worse, because it's not tenable to have people in a camp for 25 years, because we know what's happening in the country called Somalia. That's why they have decided to have a conversation. This is unique. It has not happened anywhere in the sub-region. It is the IGAD member states, and I want to thank President Uhuru for the courage to host a summit that finds or intends to find a durable solution for a situation that I think has been left to not attended to for 20 years. For 20 years. So, and including the issue of the famine. As we speak now, over 4,000 Somalis have moved to Ethiopia as a result of the displacement because of the famine situation, the drought situation leading almost to a famine that we have in Somalia. And there's possibility for more to come into the sub-region. And therefore, we need these leaders to see whether they can have continued appreciation of the difficulties in Somalia as we seek solutions for them.
Madam Juki, because it's multiple issues one is dealing with when you're talking about the refugee crisis, what should be the priority then in starting to deal with the issues at hand?
I would not call it a crisis to begin with. We do not have a refugee crisis, not in our sub-region and not in the world. We have a crisis of response. If you look at responses, for instance, that in Europe, I mean, in the US, for instance, we've seen recently certain very drastic measures that really compromise protection for refugees. And so to turn to your question, what needs to be, what's priority? There are many. Unfortunately, there's not one single one. And as I said, because classically in refugee protection, we have three solutions for refugees. In our sub-region, voluntary return, I need to emphasize, has not happened as much. And this is because conditions in countries of origin have often not stabilized enough that people went back en masse. I need to know that there have been spontaneous returns to Somalia from Yemen, from Ethiopia, and even before the announcement of the closure of Dadaab. But what conditions do we need for people to return to? And Ambassador Afe has spoken to some of them. What do we need to increase the capacity of the government in Somalia to be able to take their own people back? And even the previous government said, we want our people back, but we just do not have the capacity to hold so many if they get back. Two, in the countries of asylum that have been very hospitable, I think our sub-region is among the most hospitable really in the world, thinking about the numbers that we are talking about. Impoverishment in these areas where refugees are hosted, we need to do something about that. For instance, in Kenya, we've had people who have registered in refugee camps Kenyans, for instance. And why are they doing this? Because situations have been better in the camp. So how is it that we pull the host communities into support that goes into the refugee camps or settlements, as it were?
All right, final thoughts, Ambassador, as you tell us what happened. Where does the tripartite agreement between Kenya, Somalia, and Somalia and UNHCR stand?
Well, I think, first of all, that particular arrangement was supposed to facilitate voluntary return. And that voluntary return is a continuous exercise which continues even now. Those Somalis who feel that they would like to go back home have been assisted to go back. But those who feel that there's still danger of return and that they are not comfortable to go back are being protected. And that's why I want to thank the member states of the IGAD countries, first of all, for the continued protection, for the asylum space, and above all, for seeking a solution. A solution like this one lies both in the countries where the refugees stay and also the country called Somalia, where the refugees should eventually go back as their home.
Yes.
And I think that there is new instruments, as you know, that all the United Nations, members of the United Nations have ratified, have agreed on the comprehensive refugee response framework. And I think that the sub-region will take advantage of that framework in order to access benefits that come with the burden sharing that I've already spoken about. So we were really happy that this happened. And this is happening at a time when, as Caroline has said, there is globally some resistance towards refugee protection and support. And we are very proud of the sub-region efforts to protect, to continue to protect, to receive and protect, but above all to seek for a solution for the refugees in Somalia or from Somalia. And you know, the other thing that I haven't mentioned is the situation of Yemen. Because Yemen is not part of IGAD. But Yemen is a country which has itself some internal crisis. And there are about 300,000 Somalis needing protection there.
That are also there. Many thanks for joining us. Mohammed Afe, Ambassador, UNHCR Envoy on Somalia, as well as Caroline Njuki, Migration Coordinator, IGAD. So in that summit, we expect there will be Kenya represented by President Kenyatta, Ethiopia.
We will have it's a heads of state summit. So we will have, of course, Somalia is the point of discussion, and all other IGAD heads of state will be joining at that summit. We will also have representation from partner governments that we work closely with, that are also part of that international community burden sharing framework, the World Bank, the Islamic Bank, etc.
All right, many thanks for being with us here on Worldview. It's a summit